The air in Willow Creek carried a damp chill, the kind that clung to your bones like a whispered secret. Clara Vance, a 32-year-old music teacher with a penchant for old hymns, had moved to the small Oregon town to escape the noise of Portland, her failed marriage, the endless haunting, the weight of her ex-husband's betrayal. Willow Creek promised quiet with its fog-draped pines and crumbling Victorian homes. Her new apartment, a creaky second-floor unit above a shuttered bookstore, smelled of mildew and forgotten paper. At night, the wind howled through the alley, mimicking a low, mournful hum that Clara swore sounded like voices. She'd been there a week when she first heard it clearly, a faint, melodic chant drifting from the alley below. Not wind, not a radio, but voices, layered and harmonic, singing in a language she couldn't place. Latin, maybe? She leaned out her window, the cold biting her fingertips, but the alley was empty, save for swirling mist. The chant grew louder, a chorus of whispers that seemed to curl inside her skull, urging her to listen closer. Clara, ever the skeptic, blamed exhaustion. She'd been unpacking, reading papers, and ignoring calls from her mother, who still thought she'd fixed things with Tom. The next night, the voices returned, sharper, almost beckoning. Clara recorded them on her phone, the audio crackling with static, but capturing the eerie melody. She played it back, her heart thudding as the voices seemed to shift, forming her name Clara in a soft, pleading tone. She stopped the recording, her breath shallow. The apartment felt smaller, the walls pressing in. She checked the locks, drew the curtains, and tried to sleep. But the chant lingered in her mind like a half-remembered dream. By the third night, curiosity overpowered fear. Clara slipped on her coat, grabbed a flashlight, and crept downstairs. The alley was a narrow throat of shadow, flanked by brick walls slick with moss. The voices were louder here, vibrating through the damp air. Her flashlight beam caught something a rusted grate in the ground, partially covered by leaves. The singing seemed to rise from below, clear and insistent, pulling her closer. As she knelt, the voices stopped abruptly, replaced by a single, sharp whisper. "Find us." A cold hand seemed to brush her neck, though nothing was there. Clara stumbled back, heart racing, as the grate rattled faintly beneath her feet.
Clara barely slept. The whisper, "Find us," looping in her mind. By morning, her coffee tasted sour, and her hands shook as she scrolled through the recording again. The audio was distorted now, her name barely audible beneath the hiss like distant rain. She told herself it was a trick of the mind, but the grate in the alley haunted her thoughts. At school, her students noticed her distraction. "You okay?" Miss Vance asked Jamal, a quiet 15-year-old with a knack for piano. Clara forced a smile, muttering about a bad night, but Jamal's eyes lingered, as if he sensed something off. After class, Clara visited the town's library, a squat building with peeling paint. The librarian, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, a weary woman in her 60s with a habit of humming old spirituals, greeted her warmly. Clara asked about the alley behind her apartment, fishing for history. Evelyn's smile faded. That alley used to be part of the old chapel grounds. Torn down in the 50s, folks say it was cursed something about a choir that vanished. Clara's stomach twisted. Evelyn handed her a faded newspaper clipping from 1953. Willow Creek Chapel fire, 12 singers missing, presumed dead. The photo showed a charred foundation, eerily close to her alley. That night, the voices returned, louder, more urgent. Clara stayed inside, clutching a kitchen knife, but the singing seeped through the walls, now interspersed with sobs. The grate was heavier than expected, but it gave way with a groan, revealing a dark tunnel below. The voices surged, a chorus of anguish, and a faint glow pulsed from the depths as she peered in. A child's voice whispered, "You're one of us now." The crowbar slipped from her hand, clattering into the dark. Clara froze, the child's voice echoing in her ears. The tunnel's glow flickered, casting shadows that seemed to writhe like smoke. She wanted to run, but her legs felt anchored. As if the alley itself held her, the air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and something acrid, like burnt wood. She retrieved her flashlight, its beam trembling as it illuminated rough stone walls descending into blackness. The voices resumed, softer now, a lullaby laced with grief. Clara's guilt over leaving Tom, over ignoring her mother's calls, pressed heavier. As if the choir knew her secrets, she called Jamal, hoping his calm demeanor would ground her. He answered, voice sleepy but concerned. "Miss Vance, it's late. You okay?" She stammered about the alley, the grate, the voices. Jamal hesitated. "My grandma used to talk about that chapel. Said the choir was weird, like they sang to something, not God. He promised to come by after school tomorrow, but his unease only fueled hers." Clara hung up, staring at the tunnel. She should wait for daylight, for Jamal, for anyone, but the voices swelled, singing her name in a haunting crescendo. Against her better judgment, Clara descended, her boots slipping on slick stone. The tunnel was narrow, the air heavy with decay. Her flashlight caught carvings on the walls, strange, spiraling symbols that seemed to pulse in the light. The voices grew clear, a mix of men, women, and children, their words still unintelligible but filled with longing. At the tunnel's end, she found a chamber, its walls blackened as if scorched. In the center stood a stone altar, etched with the same symbols. A faint hum emanated from it, vibrating in her chest. As she touched the altar, the voices stopped and the glow intensified, revealing a shadowy figure in the corner, a faceless silhouette with two long lenses. It whispered, "You've come home." The chamber door slammed shut behind her. Clara's scream caught in her throat as the door's echo reverberated. The silhouette vanished, but the air grew heavier, pressing against her lungs. Her flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows across the altar. The symbols glowed faintly, their spirals seeming to twist under her gaze. She pounded on the door, but it was solid, unyielding. The voices returned, no longer melodic, but discordant, a cacophony of wails that clawed in her mind. Clara's guilt searched Tom's affairs, her mother's tears, her own stubborn pride. Each note seemed to pull a memory to the surface, twisting it into something accusatory. She searched the chamber for an exit, her hands scraping against charred walls. A loose stone revealed a small, dusty book, its leather cover cracked. Inside were handwritten hymns, their lyrics in an unfamiliar script, interspersed with sketches of the same spiraling symbols. One page bore a name, Evelyn Hart, 1953. Clara's blood ran cold. The librarian had been part of the choir, The voices grew louder, chanting in unison, and Clara swore she heard Evelyn's hum among them. She stuffed the book in her coat, desperate for answers. As she turned, the altar hummed louder, and the air shimmered. Faces appeared in the shadows, not human, but distorted. Their mouths stretched in silent screams. They drifted closer, their eyes hollow. Clara backed against the wall, her flashlight dying. The voices chanted faster, and her vision blurred. Memories of her past mixing with glimpses of strangers at burning chapel. A circle of singers, a darkness that watched. She clutched the book, her only anchor, as the faces closed in. Then, a new sound of faint tapping from the door. Miss Vance, Jamal's voice, muffled but real. The faces vanished, but the altar's hum grew deafening, and a crack split its surface, leaking a sickly green light. Jamal's voice snapped Clara back, but the green light from the altar pulsed like a heartbeat, bathing the chamber in an unnatural glow. She shouted for Jamal, her voice hoarse, but the tapping stopped. The air thickened. The scent of burnt wood now mixed with something metallic, like blood. The voices resumed, no longer a choir but a single, guttural tone that seemed to come from the altar itself. Clara's head throbbed, her thoughts fragmenting images of her ex-husband's smirk, her mother's disappointed sighs, and now, impossibly, herself standing in the chapel fire, singing. She forced herself to focus. Flipping through the book, a passage caught her eye. The hollow binds the choir. Their voices fuel its hunger. Below it, a sketch of a spiral with eyes at its center. Clara's stomach churned. The choir hadn't vanished, they'd been consumed. She glanced at the altar, its crack widening, the light now blinding. She had to get out. Using the crowbar she brought, she pried at the door, muscles straining. It budged slightly, enough for her to hear Jamal's panic shouts. "Miss Vance, something's wrong out here." The door gave way, and Clara stumbled into the tunnel, the book clutched to her chest. Jamal was there, pale, his eyes wide. "The Elliots are wrong," he stammered. Behind him, the tunnel wall seemed to shimmer, the symbols glowing. The voices surged, no longer in the chamber but all around, chanting in her head. Clara grabbed Jamal's arm, pulling him toward the ladder, but the ground shook, and the tunnel began to collapse. Stones fell, dust choked the air, and a cold, skeletal hand grabbed her ankle. Yanking her back, she screamed, kicking free, as the green light erupted behind them. In a voice not human, but ancient roared, "You cannot leave." Clara and Jamal scrambled up the ladder, the tunnel collapsing in a deafening roar. The green light chased them, tendrils of it licking at their heels. They burst into the alley, gasping, as the grate slammed shut behind them, sealing the tunnel. The voices stopped, but the air vibrated with a low hum, and the fog seemed to pulse, as if alive. Clara clutched the book, its pages warm against her skin. Jamal, trembling, pointed to the alley walls, new symbols that appeared, spiraling toward the sky. They ran to Clara's apartment, locking the door. She spread the book on the table, its pages now glowing faintly. Jamal, usually composed, was unraveling. "My grandma warned me about this town," he said. "She said something lives here, something old." Clara nodded, her mind racing. The book described a ritual the choir had sung to summon the hollow, an entity that fed on guilt and despair. Their voices bound it, but the fire hadn't destroyed it. It had freed it, trapping the singer's souls. Clara's arrival, her own guilt, had reawakened it. They needed help. Clara called Layla, who arrived an hour later, skeptical but alarmed by their panic. Evelyn, uninvited, knocked soon after, her eyes too bright. "You found my book," she said, voice soft but sharp. Clara realized Evelyn wasn't just a survivor, she was the hollow's keeper, bound to it since 1953. The room grew cold, the hum returning. Layla screamed as shadows coalesced, forming the faceless silhouette from the chamber. Clara acted on instinct, tearing pages from the book and chanting a hymn she memorized as a child. The silhouette recoiled, but Evelyn lunged, her hands claw-like. Jamal threw a lamp, stunning Evelyn, and Clara kept chanting, her voice shaking but steady. The shadows dissolved, and Evelyn collapsed, her body aging rapidly, crumbling to dust. The hum faded, the air stilling, but as they caught their breath, Clara noticed the booklet's pages were blank, except for a new sketch, her own face, singing, trapped in a spiral. She burned the book, but at night, she still hears the choir, her own voice among them, whispering her name.